Hello, my name is Brad Hausler, and this is my final project for creative and critical thinking with Professor Amy Lantinga. What I'm trying to do here is create or restructure a unit that I currently have, and also to redo a final assessment that is not traditional and opens up students' ability to create understanding. All right. Now, this is going to be different. I'm making more of a YouTube video rather than using VoiceThread because I often struggle with forgetting what I previously said. So I tend to like to go straight through things. But anyways, getting back to the curriculum. What used to happen is many of my students weren't able to see the connections between their lives, the curriculum, government and policy and the current events we talked about, and one of the hardest things to understand in our course, which is the Federal Reserve. And what I'm trying to do is, in the second half of our course, our macroeconomics unit is our half of the year, is connect the personal financial literacy that I have to teach to their life, as well as the Federal Reserve and government, the role of government in economics and their life, right? And trying to show how everything is interconnected. And that's what they seem to struggle with, and they struggle to engage with it, where it becomes more abstract and a little bit more tedious in figuring everything out. So what has previously gone very successful in my class are really three different types of overarching ideas, which are creation-based hands-on projects like Shark Tank. Our investment guides are selling an economy where you're working with many other people and there's an end goal. I often give out prizes and awards. Debates have worked relatively well in my class, especially when we discuss business versus academia, people who are inherently more risk averse or people that are more inclined to take risks. And then the concept of democratizing the Federal Reserve, that seems to get people fired up at the end of the year. And then also our documentaries and discussions based on those go pretty well, like Too Big to Fail and Inside Job about 2008 and the Great Recession and how it was cleaned up, as well as Vice News episodes about current affairs. Even though they're a little explicit, that tends to get a high school crowd ready to roll. So the problem is the abstract nature of the curriculum and trying to connect it to the student. Additionally, students who typically perform strongly engage more with microeconomics, they seem to lose this interest when we reach these larger, more abstract concepts. And then the political discourse that can develop during these times can foster some uncomfortable discussions. And what I'm trying to do is actually have those discussions and kind of reduce some student guards. So that way they're more inclined to actually talk. And I feel like people avoid that now, and that's hurting us. Additionally, people fail to remember content, lessons, and skills outside of the classroom, much like the case in, I think it was like the 160 range in the textbook for Ginny Newman and Case, where they were discussing that one student that was really good in class but then out of class failed to think skeptically. I think my students can do that in my classroom, but then it's an elective. So 6 months down the road when I see them, I'll mention something and it's like they completely forgot all about it, and that bothers me. The setting is in Lunenburg, Massachusetts, this tiny little town over here. I think they were a little generous with the borders. Not that this does kind of matter, especially against the political discourse part, because there can be a lack of views. It's relatively conservative. It lacks diversity. It's rather homogenous in its makeup. It's mostly middle and upper middle class backgrounds. So when we start talking about inequities in the economy, this is a relatively closed off section of Massachusetts. These kids don't really get to see the world around them, and they haven't had a lot of hardships. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but they do somewhat live in a bubble. And so when I try and burst that bubble, there can be some pushback. I'm mostly in this class, it's now open to 10th to 12th graders. It used to be just 11th and 12th, which creates an additional challenge because I can have a 10th grade college prep level student, not that that hinders their understanding, but they can be placed in the same class as, an AP student about to go to Harvard. And that's a challenging spectrum to try and educate. Other people that are going to be involved here are parents, teachers, administration, because they all have values and beliefs that are affected by the ideas that are percolating in students' minds and the things that I'm saying in my classroom. So I need to be aware of how others will react. So what needs to happen is I need to completely rethink things. So what I'm proposing is that I reorder my curriculum for the second half of the year rather than chunking up into individual parts. I want to try and weave things into a better way. And so this is the intended vision here, where we're going to emphasize more of the thinking skills. We're going to rework, or what I'm going to say is rechunkify or rechunkification of assessments. And I also want to create more of a final discussion and reflection type assessment versus a traditional final. And this connects back to some of the course readings we discussed the issues of putting a reward on the end of something. So maybe by taking out, I'll get to that later, but taking out the idea of a hard grade on a final might actually generate more honest reflection and understanding. So step one here, reordering the curriculum. For the existing structures, I use finance and investing as a middle ground area because we do this Shark Tank project, which if I exit out here, you'll see. Um, it's this lengthy thing over here. It's insane. So we got all sorts of stuff going on where they're going to get $500,000 and they work and they make websites and presentations and marketing schemes, and that works well. And I use that to segue into investing in the stock market. And that tends to get students pretty fired up. And then I naturally try and bring that further by, talking about where would they put all the money that they're earning? Well, probably in a bank and, taxation, and then from so on and so forth, it goes in this order. But what happens is by the end, students don't see the connection. They don't see how the curriculum is woven together. And that's on me. I don't think I've done a great job with that. I don't have a background in economics. And I was handed this when I was given my job 2 years ago. And I've been kind of just staying with what the previous teacher had done while putting my new ideas in there. And this is the year I'm really going to re-envision the whole process after some testing with it. So the existing understandings I felt were pretty lackluster. They're mostly based on enterprise, and I feel like I don't know where these were made or when these were made, to be honest, because I wasn't at the school. And I just feel like they don't connect to what I'm teaching. And I also don't think it fosters really creative and critical thinking. I think they're pretty generalist in that you could find them in a quick Google search. And I haven't done that, but I shall. Now, step two, I want to emphasize thinking. And this is where I'm going to talk about the pedagogical framework and the inspiration for this new course, right? Or not this new course, but this new half of the course, right? Because I want them to not just give me an acknowledgement or a verbal cue that they're understanding. I want to see them act in a certain way where they're continuously inquiring about deeper understandings. They're creating their own views, their own beliefs that, some of this is factual, but some of it is also opinion based. I want them to have an authentic understanding of the content. All right. I also want to try and foster a conscious resolve within the students to act, not to simply just, remember and then forget for a test. And I'm thinking by problematizing the learning process and by not necessarily using traditional assessments, I think I can create deeper understandings within my students. Modeling interactions with students and discussions and during project development, and then the structuring of the environment itself, desk formations, all of that. That can help mitigate some of the current issues in my classroom to an extent, but I can't force an understanding. I can't force or preach to somebody to say, hey, you need to think more. You need to think more creatively. I need to provide them structures and ideas and environments, but I can't just make them do it. It's like kind of like that issue with engagement. I can't just make it happen. I can influence if it happens, but I can't just have it happen. So the new order I'm proposing, and this is part of what I'm trying to redo here, is still use that finance and investing as an intersection, and then actually take the personal financial literacy and weave it on back up, because it's a very long project. I'm going to cut to it in a minute. And that's a hard thing for a lot of kids because there's sections of that project that can align with each of these other areas. Because as you'll see, I'll call it the PFL, Personal Financial Literacy. The PFL project works with each other unit here, so I can weave it throughout, chunking up the assignment while also introducing new concepts, events, and kind of keep people on their toes so they're not constantly stuck with the same thing. And then they can finish off the personal financial literacy portion of the course, which would then lead them to a course reflection. And then I've also made some new understandings. So I want them to understand that economic activity influences decision making at the personal, professional, and political level. I also want them to understand that institutions provide structure in the rules of the game. However, that does not necessitate fairness and equality. I don't want them to assume that all institutions are good and fair, and especially now more than ever, I think we've seen that. I want them to understand that social conditions affect business, and there are risks and benefits to various sorts of investments. And lastly, I want them to understand that the US government uses fiscal policy and monetary policy to influence the economy and the Federal Reserve System to help achieve economic stability. Because we've definitely certainly been talking about that amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Going back to emphasize the thinking, continuing the pedagogical framework here. The other major source I used was Kaufman and Greg Wire's Wired to Create. I want to push nonconformist thinking and have students contest and challenge one another intellectually rather than just settling for basic assumptions and answers. I don't want them to just go for a base level understanding. I want them to question their understanding from Monday and from the previous Friday and their best friend. I want them to have some arguments and heated discussions. And I want them to create their own understanding, not just something that they've learned from their parents or from me. And I thought this quote really applied. By nature, human beings are highly risk averse, and when there is motivation to reduce uncertainty, creativity biases are activated on both individual and institutional levels. Across the board, people, not to mention institutions and decision makers, deny creative ideas even while they ask for them. And so I want students to realize that they naturally hide their creativity in their problem solving ability, in their creative tasks, and I want them to really push and open their minds up throughout the course. There's also this fundamental need for humans to pursue things that matter, and I think that by problematizing the content and by making it more personal, especially with weaving in the personal financial literacy, I'll be making it more engaging. Because they'll see that constant connection to their life. So they might learn about something very abstract, and then I'll weave it into the personal financial literacy course where they're budgeting for the first year in the real world, whether that be 4 years after college, right after high school, after the military, or after a PhD, whatever it may be. So here's the re-chunkification of the core assignments. So the Federal Reserve debate, I'm still going to keep. But I'm going to be weaving that budget or that personal financial literacy project, aka the PBP, throughout. And I'm also going to try and take our too big to fail debate and extend the timeline by giving it a few more days, 2 days of research, also watching the documentary, 2 nights of reflecting and answering. And then I want to make more room for side conversations about the effects of 2008, especially on the individual level, how people act now in our economy. For my final, this is the real main thing that I wanted to redo here. I used to use a standard multiple choice test with some graphing, and I might still put it there for hard data, but only give it, a 5% value on the term versus the 15% that it's supposed to be. And so what I want to do is create a multi-day discussion and reflection period that really tries to weave together the course and evaluate the understandings. And they'll start at home, and then they'll come to the discussion. That will be small group, then large group. And if the dynamics don't work, I also presented them the option to podcast and listen. And or if we're stuck at home because of COVID, they can use that podcasting to replace the classroom dynamic. And then they'll do their own individual reflection later on and submit it. And then I'm going to try and cooperatively grade with them and discuss how they did. Did they really demonstrate their understanding, their creativity, their comprehension of the contents, and were they honest with themselves throughout the course? I've linked these in, and I've linked the presentation, and so all things should be able to work for you here. And so I'll actually exit out for a moment and show you what this new reflection looks like. So this is going to be my final, and this is what I've created. So it's in 3 parts. So part 1 is the deliberation and preparation. So for 2 days, I explained what they can do at mornings, afternoons, study halls, and evenings. They can consider the following understandings. I want to know if they agree or disagree and why. what they associate with each statement, which lessons, readings, lectures, and discussions jump to the forefront of their memory, and can we accept these understandings fully? And those are the four understandings that I provided earlier. And it can be bullet form, essay form. I just want to literally see words on paper and a lot of it. And I don't care if it's not in order. I just want to see them spill their brains onto paper, because the reflection will get at it. I'll look through their notes and I'll look through their reflection, and then we'll talk about it. I've never done this, and I don't know. I'm trying to really change up what I'm doing in my classroom. So part two is where it gets a little bit more formal. So we'll start in small groups. It says 4 to 6, it could be as small as 3. We'll see what happens. And they're going to discuss their writing ideas. I want to have 1 to 2 people scribing the class discussion. And after that small discussion, to get things rolling, I'm going to have the 4 understandings on 2 to 3 different whiteboards, and people can, or groups can, write their conversations, their questions, their tidbits in all sorts of different colors, right? And then we'll get into a class discussion about each one and start formulating our own understandings and our own evaluation as a class about these understandings. If none of that works and it gets really awkward, what I'll do is have kids work in 2 to 5, and members of 2 to 5, and they'll use Anchor, which is this podcasting tool that we used in this course. It worked really well. And we'll give them 30 minutes because I doubt they'll talk more than that. And I also created a video for them should they be confused. And we can exit that out. And it talks about the instructions for the assignments and the assignment and then how to podcast itself. And most of my students know how to use the platform I'm using right now. Then part 3 is a final reflection, where they can reflect on the process of unraveling those understandings. I'm also going to ask them to weave the course material together, which seems, for the first year, I'm going to let that be abstract. I just want to see what students generate. I want to ask them what was challenging throughout the course and this process, what was easy. They can even tell me if the whole thing was pointless to them. And then there's some additional questions that they can use to help shape their reflection. And then, as I said, the grading is negotiable. So we'll talk as a class what we think an A, a B, a C, and an F should look like for this first year. And then once I start getting some guidelines and examples and exemplars, I'll have more and more to roll with. But it's a really open-ended final reflection, and I'm trying to take away the penalty of a grade and take away that typical, remember for a test type strategy that students rely on so much. Now, some of the challenges and implications. So for challenges, it's going to be hard for students to maintain what I would call a curriculum flow, which is an understanding of how the content weaves together smoothly, but I think by chunking things up and by really emphasizing the understanding that we're working with and our spot in the curriculum timeline, I think that will help students understand why we're weaving. I'm going to try and each and every day challenge a new student to explain to the class why we're doing what we're doing. Additionally, I want to develop persistence and work ethic within students, but that's going to be difficult, seeing that that's a challenge, especially for my second semester seniors, where they've gone into college and they just want to drop everything, and that's the issue. My fall classes are so different than my spring classes. I want to prevent piggybacking during discussions in the final assessment. I think I've curtailed it a little bit with the podcasting opportunity and the being able to grade yourself. I think that might actually push people to give me a better assessment because it's on them, especially the written portion of the reflection. But that's going to be a challenge as well. And then I don't know if I'm going to get some administrative, kickback or pushback for the final assessment being so open-ended. Implications. I think students will express real learning through this revised assessment because they're not going to be able to just learn to test. They have to really explain their understanding. The curriculum is problematized and connects to real life, increasing the value of what is learned as students see how skills and content apply to the modern world. Additionally, I think students will increase their interest due to the open-ended nature of the problematized curriculum. They'll see that budgeting for yourself connects to you. It's them. They don't want to shortchange their future. And also by explaining their agency within this world, I think that will also maybe increase engagement. Lastly, another implication is that there's an increased likelihood of commitment to act through discussion, creative assignments, and newly learned agencies as I try and empower students in this world in which they feel is so minuscule. And I'm going to try and explain that through voting, by staying informed, by spreading awareness of newfound information, and then generating their own information or their own understandings as a skeptical, critical thinker and a creative thinker that um, they have power. And I think that's something important to tell our students. And these are my works cited. And before I tail off here, I'll just show you some of the assignments, but this is technically the end of the presentation, but these will all be hyperlinked in my PowerPoint if you want to sift through. I'll make sure that's all there for you. Anyways, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure seeing everybody work throughout the semester.